The White House in the US is now confirming an issue for Bitcoin that could be very, very challenging for the markets in the coming weeks. Additionally, there's the next trade uncertainty, and Bitcoin is currently selling off as we have new statements regarding the whole trade situation with Donald Trump and Canada. We definitely need to take a look at this because we always see that tariffs mean massive problems for Bitcoin. On top of that, we have good inflation data. That looks good. It looks like interest rate cuts are on the way. We're also looking at this data, but we also see that in Japan, government bonds are at a record high. And that could also put Bitcoin in a tough spot. And most people aren't paying any attention to that at all. Finally, I'll show you my new cliff dive. But let's dive right into the inflation data that just got released. And they were initially very, very positive. And as a result, Bitcoin initially reacted very, very positively. Here, the consumer price index inflation in February drops to 2.8, and it's below the expected 2.9%. The core inflation of the consumer price index drops to 3.1%, which is below the expected 3.2%. This marks the first decline in both the overall and core consumer price index since July 2024. And now we see that inflation is going down here. And that's really, really important because central banks always look at inflation measurements. So when inflation is high, then interest rates might not be cut. When inflation is declining, then you can lower interest rates. And that's exactly what Donald Trump wants. He promised that inflation would go down. He wants to bring down interest rates. And he can lower interest rates through various mechanisms, either by triggering a recession, provoking war, or something like that, or by simply bringing down inflation. It seems to be working what Donald Trump has in mind. Inflation is going down, and Donald Trump is now one step closer to bring down the interest rates. And when interest rates go down, the Bitcoin market views that very, very positive. We've also seen that Bitcoin has pumped up here for the first time after this news, because clearly we have new money, we're in a low interest phase, and so on. And then we go back into a risk-on sentiment. That means we're currently in a risk-off sentiment. People are moving into government bonds, into gold, they're going into safe havens. They're getting out of risk assets like tech stocks and Bitcoin. However, if we go back to the risk-on sentiment, Bitcoin becomes very, very positive. Then the capital will shift again from bonds, perhaps also from gold, from other safe havens, into Bitcoin, and now we have to be careful. There was a very, very important statement from the White House. We'll also go into the whole tariff story in a moment, because that's really what's moving the markets. The most right now, the whole tariff situation. What are the announcements from the White House from Donald Trump? But first, let's take a look at the statement from the press secretary directly from the White House. Because here a problem is confirmed that Bitcoin will be in the spotlight in the coming weeks and months.
When it comes to the stock market, the numbers that we see today, the numbers we saw yesterday, the numbers we'll see tomorrow are a snapshot of a moment in time. And as President Trump has said, and I'm here to echo the remarks of this president of this White House, we are in a period of economic transition. We are in a period of transition.
It was simply about the fact that the stock market is also under pressure. And then she just says here, the stock market is just a snapshot. Just want to make it clear that the stock markets aren't that important right now, and that it's better to look at the bigger picture. And then she also says it again and confirms it here. The US is currently in a transition, so in a state of change. And that's also what Donald Trump always says, and what is now being confirmed again by the White House. She also says here that she wants to reaffirm Donald Trump's policies. And that means that things could get turbulent again in the coming weeks, with more volatility coming our way, simply because Donald Trump isn't keeping the stock markets in the way that many investors would like. They want to see Bitcoin prices being pumped up and stock prices being pumped up. But here it's confirmed again by the White House. No, the stock markets are not the top priority for now. Bitcoin isn't the top priority right now. It's about transforming the country, steering it in a different direction. And that can come with a lot of pain at first. That means there could still be more volatility, and there might be even crazier things announced, maybe by Donald Trump. He has already said that he has no problem with raising tariffs even further. He also has no problem bothering other countries with sanctions and so on. And now we actually have something that fits this topic, because this is basically it. A setback for Bitcoin for starters. That means we have some really uncertain times ahead of us. And uncertainty is always very, very bad for the financial markets. That doesn't mean that if some bad news comes out, it's always bad. Sometimes it can actually be a problem. But above all, the uncertainty that we don't know exactly how things will go with the tariffs. They're talking about a transition phase here. When does the transition phase end? There aren't any real, exact numbers, data, facts. We don't know when the transition will be over, how intense it will get, whether there will be even more severe impacts, and what the deal is with the Department of Government Efficiency. Will they bring even crazier things to light, and so on? And as long as we don't have that security, we won't shift into a risk-on sentiment. That means as long as we're in this transition phase, people won't be fleeing into Bitcoin and risk assets. Instead, we'll continue to be in a risk-off sentiment. The next tariff story has been ignited. That means Donald Trump has indirectly provoked it. He has imposed new tariffs on Canada. I actually made a video about that yesterday. Here, Donald Trump says it's going to get worse, and all of this is happening today. And that's exactly how it happened. Now, it's not that things have gotten worse directly because of Donald Trump, but because Donald Trump has put pressure on other countries, especially Canada. So there are actually retaliatory tariffs now. It says here that Canada is imposing retaliatory tariffs of 25% on U.S. goods worth $21 billion. This happened just 10 hours after. 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum products had gone into effect. So we really need to keep a close eye on this. That means one country is now firing shots at the other. So we don't have a real war going on, but we do have something like a trade war that's really heating up. And no matter which side it is here, it's always active, whether Donald Trump says the tariffs are going up, or whether retaliatory tariffs will come and so on. Every piece of news and everything that happens here brings more uncertainty to the market. It's kind of like being in an active war. When bombs start dropping somewhere, it also creates uncertainty in the market. Then it goes down first, and after that, you don't really know how it's going to go from there. As soon as that gets resolved and people realize, hey, it's not that bad, things can bounce back up pretty quickly. We've seen that happen time and again, whenever any news about tariffs pops up. Then it went down at first, but pretty quickly it bounced back up again because people realized, hey, maybe it's not that bad after all. And then Donald Trump also used the tariffs partly just to exert pressure. Then they found a deal again and so on. Could also be that they find another deal now, where Canada puts pressure back on the U.S. Then Donald Trump says, okay, hey, let's meet somewhere in the middle or something like that. Then everything calms down again. And then the stock markets, Bitcoin, and so on, all the markets become more relaxed again. And then there's usually a pretty quick rebound back up. But as I'm looking at the chart right now, I can actually see that right when the news came out, it dropped massively. So we were somewhere around 83,000 US dollars, and now we're heading back down toward the $80,000 mark. So we can see that tariffs are the main issue we're dealing with right now. Even inflation data that is now positive and so on. Sure, it did go up a bit here, close to $84,000. Then the positive inflation data came out here, but it seems as if the negative news is currently worse. Hit the market like the positive news. The positive news provides a little relief, but the negative news is still prevalent here at the moment. When the fear and greed index is leaning more toward fear, it shows that people are still anxious. Right now, it's just that people aren't in a risk-taking mood. They're being more cautious. And then the negative news is often more serious than the positive news, even though there are so many positive updates out there. It's been like that the whole time. I mean, in this video, we're looking at a few problems, a few dangers, but in general in the market, we have a lot of positive news all the time, like yesterday's Bitcoin bill, which was then introduced here by Senator Cynthia Lummis, and so on, which is also a huge deal. People are just kind of in a panic mode right now. And then when the positive news comes out, it tends to get overlooked. And when the negative news comes out, it gets taken seriously. And then there was another report that is also causing Bitcoin to be under pressure right now and could remain under pressure for a while, which a lot of people are overlooking. So I don't want to talk it down or anything. Long-term, Bitcoin still looks very, very bullish. We're just going through a short period of correction. It could take another 2 weeks, a week, maybe a few days, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. After that, I definitely see a very, very positive outlook here. But when we're in a certain sentiment right now, it gets tough to break out of that sentiment unless there are massive things happening in the market. But now we have the next story that Japan has the highest interest rates, meaning the highest bond yields since 2006. And that's really significant for the yen carry trade. And now let's take a look at why this is still a heavy blow for Bitcoin. And a lot of people are currently overlooking this. I actually asked Croc about this because I really wanted to try out Croc. This is in reference to Japan having such high interest rates as Croc assesses it. Rising yields on Japanese 30-year bonds hitting their highest levels since 2006 signal a tight monetary policy and higher borrowing costs. This could mean pressure for Bitcoin, as investors might shift to safer assets like bonds, especially since global markets are already on edge due to recession fears. However, the volatility of Bitcoin often contradicts traditional trends. In any case, watch out for strong fluctuations in the market, so Croc also expects that we could see some significant ups and downs coming our way. And this is basically the yen carry trade. That means when Japanese government bonds are very, very high, global investors pull out of risk assets because they're getting attractive returns here. That means if there are higher returns here, people will leave. They pull out of Bitcoin, they pull out of tech stocks, and so on. Some of them then invest in Japanese government bonds because they are simply very, very attractive. Yields are high, and that's bad news for Bitcoin, so we always have to keep that in mind. I want to point out that other global markets, like Japan and so on, have a massive influence on Bitcoin. I mean, this isn't going to crash Bitcoin or anything like that. But that's just another factor that pulls capital out of the market. So we have push and pull factors. For example, push factors include the M2 money supply, which is moving forward massively. If the yields on government bonds drop significantly, then it's no longer attractive to invest in those bonds. Instead, it becomes appealing to get back into risk-on assets. Then we have push factors like, for example, the assurance that Donald Trump says, okay, the trade war is over, or we have fixed tariffs now and nothing's going to change that. That would be another form of assurance. Another would be if there's some kind of green light in Ukraine where we know, okay, there's peace and so on. So we just need a bit more of that. All the push factors that are currently missing will come back sooner or later. The money supply is going to increase and interest rates are going to drop. Eventually, the situation with the tariffs will settle down. And then we have all the push factors that will continue to boost Bitcoin. That's why it's also foolish to sell all your Bitcoin or anything like that in panic mode right now. Or to think, now we're going into the ultra bear market or something like that. I mean, there is a chance that we might already be in a bear market or something, but I absolutely don't think that's the case. But feel free to drop your thoughts below about whether you think we're already in a bear market. I mean, we can also see it based on news like this, for example. Rumble is buying $17 million worth of Bitcoin as part of a new treasury strategy. So we're now seeing Rumble actively investing in Bitcoin. And I mentioned that I said, hey folks, Rumble is very, very likely to do this because Michael Saylor met with the Rumble CEO. I actually met him here in El Salvador at a golf event hosted by Max Kaiser. Or what does met even mean? I was just sitting next to him, kind of felt like it, but I didn't talk to him or something like that. Rumble also has a very interesting strategy in play. They also want to use Bitcoin as a treasury asset. Here you have your Bitcoin treasury strategy up and running. They're also buying Bitcoin now, and you can see that the companies are definitely convinced. Metaplanet has struck again. Michael Saylor has now announced his new purchases or his new capital raisings. Rumble is getting in on it and so on. That means there are definitely players who are absolutely convinced about this. And now I'm going to show you my massive cliff dive. If you want to buy Bitcoin here before I show you that, then check out 21 Bitcoin down below. Here you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. And with the code, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Super easy, safe, and simple for beginners, advanced users, and pros. And now let's take a look at the cliff dive. That's not really a cliff dive, it's more like a chill jump. So just a mini Valhalla bomb. But go ahead and drop your rating in there. 1 really bad, 21 really good. And feel free to drop me an honest rating, because the jump wasn't exactly spectacular. So feel free to give me a bad rating. Check out the jump. I'm signing off already. Peace out.